Ma'am, shall we start, ma'am?
Yes. Yeah, we can.
Okay, ma'am. The biggest motivation is your own thoughts. So think big and motivate yourself to win. With this positive quote, I wish you all a happy afternoon. On behalf of Department of English, PPG College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore, I welcome you all to the 7th day of 7-day national level virtual faculty development program on Discourse on cross culture and cultural drama, and the topic of today is drama in literature. With this note, I would like to welcome our today's guest, Dr. V. Malar Ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of English, LRG Government Arts College for Women, Tripur. Welcome you, ma'am. I would like to welcome our beloved Principal, Dr. N. Muthumani Ma'am, to this session. Welcome you, ma'am. I would like to welcome my dear colleagues, Ms. V. Menaka Devi and Ms. R. Dharini Devi, Assistant Professors, Department of English, to this session. Welcome you both. I would like to welcome our dear participants to this session. Without you people, it's highly impossible. Welcome you all. Now, I would like to invite Ms. V. Menaka Devi, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to introduce our guest, Dr. V. Malar Ma'am.
All power is within you. You can do anything and everything. A warm good afternoon to one and all present here. I feel delighted to introduce our chief guest of the day, Dr. V. Muller, Assistant Professor, Department of English, LRG Government College for Women, Tirupur. Ma'am has 28 years of teaching experience. She has worked as a vice principal, voice and essence trainer, quality analyst, and assistant professor. Ma'am has published papers like teacher cognition and integration of language skills and so on. Ma'am has delivered a talk on communication skills to the final year students facing interviews for the final year UG students at Arulanandar College, Madurai. Ma'am was awarded for the best paper entitled Manpower Management in Educational Institutions, served as Head Department of English, Deputy Warden, Coordinator, and so on. With a short profile, I would like to hand over the session to Malar ma'am. Ma'am, the session is yours, ma'am.
And thank you. Good afternoon, all of you. Respected principal, am I audible? Excuse me, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you're
Okay.
audible.
Okay. 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 So good afternoon, all of you. Respected principal, PPG College of Arts and Science, the Department of English faculty members who are attending the faculty development program. I think it's been going on for the past 7 days, and today is the last day. And I'm happy to share my ideas with you this afternoon for a few minutes. Shall we start, Deepika?
Yes, ma'am.
The slide, the first
Yes, ma'am.
slide.
Yes, ma'am, sure, ma'am.
Yes. The topic which I have chosen is trauma in literature, and the Department of English wanted me to choose something in relation to the overall topic which they had given us. And my choice was trauma in literature. All of us know what is trauma in literature. All of us are familiar with the term trauma, right? And it is nothing but going through very stressful, frightening, or distressing events in our day to day life. If not every day, maybe occasionally, maybe frequently, depending on the situation in which we are. When we talk about emotional or psychological trauma, we might mean situations or events we find traumatic and how we are affected by our experiences. Traumatic events can happen at any age. Age is not a barrier, and they can cause a long lasting harm. Everyone has a different reaction to trauma, as we all know. All of us are individuals. We might notice any effects quickly, or it may be a long time process. It can be immediate, or even after months or years together that we get affected. Next. What does trauma actually mean? All of us are familiar with this also. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, not the day to day, the usual, the routine, but it is an unusual event, how we respond to a terrible event like an accident, crime, or natural disaster. Reactions such as shock and denial are typical of trauma. Next, what are the three parts of trauma? Number one, we may call it the event. Number two, what are the experiences that we get out of the event that has been caused, that has been happening to an individual? And what is the effect that it has caused? What is the impact that an event has caused in us? Next, we go on to the next slide. What are the five types of trauma? They are rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, injustice. These are the five fundamental wounds that may cause any individual and may result in physical, emotional, or mental ailments. Next, what is trauma literature? Trauma literature, as we all can guess from the term, it refers to a work of art that conveys a sense of profound loss or intense fear on an individual or at the collective level. Next, what is the connection between trauma and literature? Literary trauma theory seeks to identify trauma texts. Trauma has to be in caps, okay, and that's a slip. That is, texts that employ intertextuality, repetition, fragmentation, language manipulation to create meaning due to extreme traumatic stress. Next, Deepika, have we gone to the next slide? Yeah. What are literary representations of trauma? Trauma is represented through the following. For example, we have a fragmented narrative voice in literature. We have the notion of haunting and ghosts there in literary pieces. We have repetition, we have allusion, and all these devices are used to represent the traumatized state of the minds of the character or characters collectively. Next, who introduced trauma theory in literature? It is Kathy Caruth, professor of English. In 1995, she wrote a critical introduction to a collection of essays titled Trauma Explorations in Memory. In 1996, she published Unclaimed Experience Trauma, Narrative, and History. Consequently, she has been recognized as a pioneer of trauma theory. Next, today's session, I have planned to analyze just three novels, depending on the time which is available. Maybe two, if time permits, let's go on to the third. We start with Toni Morrison's Beloved. Next, Toni Morrison Toni Morrison, her original name was Chloe Anthony Wofford. She was born on 18th February 1931, Lorraine, Ohio, US. And she's no more. She's an American writer. We would all have heard of her for sure. Noted for her examination of Black experience, particularly Black female experience within the Black community. She received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993. Next, next. Yeah, it is Beloved was published in 1987. It won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and it is based on the true story of a runaway slave who, at the point of recapture, kills her infant daughter in order to spare her a life of slavery. A film adaptation of the novel was released in 1998 and starred Oprah Winfrey. In addition, Morrison wrote the libretto for Margaret Garner in 2005, which is an opera about the same story that inspired Beloved. Next, is it the next slide? Okay. So something different in mine. Okay. The work is published. It was published in 1987, Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. We have seen, and the work examines the destructive legacy of slavery as it chronicles the life of a black woman called Sage. She is the protagonist of the novel, and this happens in Civil War days, pre-Civil War days, when she was a slave in Kentucky and Ohio in 1873. Although Seth lives there as a free woman, she is held prisoner by memories of the trauma of her life as a slave. Next, trauma in the novel, we see the trauma faced by the communities which stems from the atrocities they faced during their lives as slaves. The novel is based upon the atrocities caused by the evil system of slavery. We have these characters, Save, Paul D, Denver, Baby Suggs. All these people we see have faced similar trauma, but as they are all individuals, they have individualized effects and responses or reaction to the trauma that has been caused in their lives. Next. We start with the protagonist, Save. She is traumatized by slavery. She is traumatized by the murder which she has done, her murdering of her own daughter. Motherhood pushes her into further psychological instability because of what she has done as a mother. She has actually murdered her own daughter. And her children are the motivation for her to escape slavery. At the same time, they are the reason which leads to her decline into dissociation. The children play the role of being a motivation as well as dissociation in her life. Next. The trauma experienced by Seth. Trauma plays a strong role in Seth's decision to grab her four children. It is very sad to see that she grabs her four children, all her four children, and runs to the shed to kill them after she realizes that her master has come for them. The reason why the person murders, the reason behind Seth's murder of her own child is She doesn't want the child, or all her children for that matter, to be continuing their lives as slaves. She doesn't want that to happen, and that is why she has murdered. It is there that she kills the baby who comes to be known as beloved. The baby whom Seth has murdered is named beloved. The other three are spared only because of Seth's lack of time. Fortunately, the other three are alive, and one baby whom she had named beloved has been murdered by Seth. Next, struggles of Seth. Seth's life is full of struggle, as we see in the novel. In the past, we see her struggling against slaveholders, and then we see her struggling against the society, and then she is considered to be a savage mother and is blamed of murder by the society. She is not allowed to be a member of her own society as a result of what she has done. The main struggle that harms her is the one with herself. She undergoes severe trauma as a result of what she has done to her own child. Next, mental illness in shape. The working of PTSD. All of us know what is PTSD. It is post traumatic stress disorder. That is evident in the novel, and we see Seth unable to come out of the guilt that she has. And beloved, the woman character who comes into the novel a bit later is the reincarnation of the guilt that suffocates her. We all know that the baby was named Beloved, and we see a woman coming into the family with the name of Beloved. That is more than enough for Sage to be filled with guilt. Even the ordinary events in her life become the stimuli for the reappearance of the traumatic event. Next, we see trauma experienced by Paul. Eventually, Paul D escapes to the north for freedom. Even when he reaches freedom, however, the cumulative experiences of his past leave him deeply traumatized, and they cause him to lock away his feelings in the rusted tobacco tin of his heart. That is how his heart has been described in the novel. In the present, we see him repressing his past by refusing to sit still. Next, Denver, the child who is alive, the daughter who is alive, along with the mother. She has the abilities to cope, yet she as a child, she as a girl is stunted emotionally by years of relative isolation. Though she is 18 years old, she acts much younger and she is unable to digest or tolerate what has happened in the past. She holds an intense fear of the world and a perilously fragile sense of the self. She is unable to bear what has actually gone and what the family has gone through in the past. Next, and the trauma in Denver is not wanting to hear the fact that her mother brutally killed their children. Denver makes herself deaf, dodging the contempt of community to her and her family. She doesn't want to be the normal, usual self anymore. This hearing loss is a symptom of trauma, not physical disease. As we all know, she wishes to be deaf, not as physical disease, but this is a symptom of trauma, but rather a subjective reaction to the trauma that she has undergone. She has great contempt for the society and the community, people around her. She doesn't want to listen to anyone, hear anyone speak. And that is what trauma has done to her. Next, and we come to the mother-in-law, baby Suggs. What kind of trauma she has undergone? Born into slavery, baby Suggs faced hardship at the hands of white slaveholders. She has 9 children, but every one of them, except for her youngest, is taken from her. Having your children removed from you can be considered a traumatic event for slave owners. We know how traumatic it could be. Next, we see that post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is prevalent in almost all the characters in the novel, save Denver, save the mother, Denver, the daughter, Paul D, a slave. All these people need to overcome the effects of slavery and future generations. Of all these, we see Seth portraying the strongest symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder. Next, psychological impact of slavery we see here in the novel leads to the dramatic transition from warmth to coldness. All the happenings, all the violence, all the injustice have been terribly affecting the people, changing them from warmth to coldness, from openness to isolation of the victims. The setting in the novel expresses the emotional impact, and various events unfold to shed light on the emotional reverberations of slavery in the novel. We move on to the next novel, An Untamed State by Roxane Gay. Toni Morrison would be a familiar author for you. Beloved also would have been very familiar. I wanted to start in a chronological, I wanted to go about in a chronological order. That's why I started with Beloved. We move on to An Untamed State by Roxane Gay, who is a living author, born 15th October 1974, graduated from University of Nebraska Lincoln and Michigan Technological University. Next, she is an American writer, professor, editor, social commentator, and she is the author of the New York Times best-selling essay collection named Bad Feminist, published in 2014, the short story collection IT 2011, the novel An Untamed State 2014, the short story collection Difficult Women 2017, and the memoir called Hunger, which was published in 2017. Next, we move on to the story of the novel An Untamed State. We see Mireille Duval Jameson, who was born and raised in the United States. Her parents are from Haitian descent. Her parents moved back to Haiti. While vacationing at her parents' house with her husband and child in Haiti, she is kidnapped. When her father, who by now has become a wealthy Haitian developer, refuses to pay her ransom. The ransom is supposed to be $1 million, and the father is not ready to pay the ransom. She is gang raped and tortured by her captors, who keep her imprisoned for 13 long days before finally releasing her. And Happily Ever After, the first portion of the book called Happily Ever After, the novel moves back and forth in time between Mireille's captivity and her earlier life, meeting and falling in love with husband Michael during graduate school in the Midwest of the United States. Next. And the later section of the novel called Once Upon a Time, it follows the, it talks about Mireille, who is in the aftermath of her trauma, including her time living with Michael's mother, her mother-in-law, Lorraine, on the family farm in Nebraska. As her father's next slide, please. As her father's position of never paying ransom is tested, Mireille sits in a barren room, repeatedly visited and sexually assaulted by a man she thinks of as the commander and his henchmen, who tell her that her family has forgotten about her. Unable to think of rescue, Mireille revisits her early memories for solace, but finds only pain in them. Next. Gay's novel tells an unflinching tale of trauma and of the post-traumatic stress disorder that follows. It is brutal and harsh and difficult to read, but it's also a love story. As Mireille sits in her cage, she narrates her and her husband Michael's love story, full of difficulty and arguments. It was not a romantic story as it is usually seen. It's full of difficulty and arguments and misunderstandings of the struggle of a mixed age relationship, and Michael struggling to understand her homeland of Haiti as she struggles with his unrelenting mother, Lorraine, and his dedication to the farm he grew up on. And in the after, Michael has to learn how to accept Mireille's struggle as she fights to cope with her trauma, and he wants to protect her, to help her, but doesn't know how to help her really. He is lost, we can say, has to find ways of consoling her and being with her or keeping her happy after the terrible incident has happened. Next. Narrated. The novel we see is narrated from Mireille's perspective. It delves deep into this ordeal, and we see Roxane Gay, the author, keeping the close-up on her throughout the novel. She intensifies the narrative connection with her even as Mireille dissociates from the woman she was. We see dissociation happening, disintegration happening in the mind of Mireille. Other sections from the perspectives of her father and her husband, Michael, offer context but no relief from the family's nightmare. The family is still caught in the nightmare of being kidnapped, tortured, and sexually abused. And still, it is to Mireille's view that Gay insistently returns, delving deeper into the way her abduction and treatment in captivity has irrevocably marked her. The scars still remain in her mind, and it is very hard to remove the scars from her, both physical, emotional, psychological. Next, repeating that she is no one, Mireille displaces herself from her, from even mundane scenes of family togetherness. She doesn't want to be actually amidst people. She doesn't want to be her usual self as she was before the traumatic incident happened. So she shuns off people, she comes away from people, and she wishes to be alone. So mundane scenes of family togetherness, she's not for. and she finds no relief in the prospect of resuming her normal routines. Even if she tries to go back to her normal routine, she is unable to find any relief and she struggles. We see her continuing to struggle. The fault lines that were already present in Mireille and Michael's marriage. We see that there is no match in their race or class or whatever. There is a kind of gap between Mireille and Michael in terms of race and class, and that is what happens. That is the cause of their misunderstanding and the kind of miscommunication, argument, and fight, we can say. Next, Mireille says that she is no one. She displaces herself from even mundane scenes of family togetherness we see. And the next slide, we see the novel as a gripping psychological portrait of how trauma remakes the body to respond only to itself. The novel refers to the broader currents of fate in life. The family is forced to confront when Mireille is kidnapped, but also the roil of sense memories and emotions created by her ordeal, which will travel with her unwanted. So the memories, the emotions all travel with her, even when she tries to come back to her usual self, come back to her normal self. She is unable to come back to her normal self. The novel describes brutal facts of subjugation and punishment, the agony of waiting to be rescued, and the protection of the brain. Next, we need to go to slide number 36. The novel is examined from a psychological vision. It symbolizes the sexual violence and trauma and serves to expose the sexual abuse impact on the memory. It provides some methods of how connecting between the traumatized person with the others, depending on common experiences of weakness, panic, according to the trauma theory, or the American theorist whom we saw as the pioneer of trauma theory, Kathy Carroll. Next, going on to the diction, slide number 37, it shows here. Going on to the diction of the novel, Roxane Gay's straightforward journalistic language at first seems too rushed, but by the time the novel is over, her prose has made it what it is. It has been very effective, very successful in conveying what she wants to convey. And her characters are complex but are outlined with such careful, sparse language that they simply seem to be who they are without need of over explanation. So the language is crisp and the characters are complex but very deep when we start analyzing them. Next, coming to the narrative style, the narrative refuses to let you look away. It makes you see it all. And although that's painful, it allows you to understand what it takes to survive something like what Mireille survives, what it takes afterwards to find your way back to yourself. So, after having survived a trauma, how do people really behave? So, we see these characters still in the state of post traumatic stress disorder, unable to come out of it. Next, we have seen that it is a brutal tale of kidnapping, rape, and trauma. There are trigger warnings for violence, manipulative emotional abuse, and more. But it's also a story of survival and of what it means to survive a trauma. So, in all ways, it is a kind of very realistic portrayal of what trauma does to individuals, to a human being. And just a few reviews of the novel. Reviewing the novel for the Los Angeles Times, Price Dalle suggests the fairy tale theme serves to translate the unspeakable trauma. Trauma itself is unspeakable for an individual, as we all know. It's not the usual thing which happens to us that we call trauma, something which is undescribable, unspeakable. So it's written from Mireille's perspective. An untamed state is an account of what is normally unaccountable, a level of trauma that, even if it is survived, is often too painful to relate. It becomes too painful to relate, and it becomes too painful to narrate, and too painful to describe. We all know what trauma is really. From the first sentence, we know Mireille has found a way to craft her story to make it bearable. She frames it as a fairy tale. Fairy tale, we see something nice happening, something pleasant happening usually. But here we see a different kind of an opening. Once upon a time, she starts in a far off land where something sad had happened. I was kidnapped, she says. Once upon a time, in a far off land, I was kidnapped. So we have a very different kind of opening, very effective. And an untamed, next slide. An untamed state received positive reviews upon publication. And Nolan Feeney, writing for Time, called it a riveting debut that captivates from its opening sentence and doesn't let go. The novel is interesting, captivating, right from the first sentence till the end. The Los Angeles Times calls it suspenseful, immediate, and realistic. The AV Club awarded it an A letter grade and praised it as a gripping psychological portrait of how trauma remakes the body to respond only to itself. That is about the reviews and awards. Yeah, just one more award. Gay was nominated for an NAACP Image Award for her outstanding literary work fiction in 2015 for An Untamed State. Next, it is slide number 44. Here is An Untamed State, a true story. Though An Untamed State is a work of fiction, Gay admits the subject matter made her nervous, really. And it's so hard to write about countries where there is truths behind the misperceptions people have, she says when she describes Haiti. She says Haiti, she describes the place as a dangerous, poverty stricken place in her interview. And geographically, Haiti is a Caribbean country that shares the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic to its east. Though it's still recovering from a 2010 earthquake, many of Haiti's landmarks dating to the early 19th century remain intact. These include Citadel Feria, a mountaintop fortress, and the nearby ruins of Sans Souci Palace, the barrack former royal home of King Henry I. That's about the geography behind Haiti. We move on to Andrea Klein, who is the author of our third novel. We have now gone through the traumatic aspects of Beloved and An Untamed State. We move on to Andrea Klein's Eden. Andrea Klein, the author, born 24th March 1970, and she is a living author, American writer, choreographer, and performance artist. Shall we move on to slide number 46, Deepika? Slide number 46, Andrea Klein. Whoever is taking charge of the slides. Move on to Andrea Klein. She is an American writer. Slide number 46. She is an American writer, choreographer, and performance artist, the author of the novels Calf and Eden. Next slide. Calf is a publisher's weekly best fiction book of 2015, and Eden is her second novel, which was published on 10th July 2018. Eden, named one of summer's smartest and most innovative thrillers by Vanity Fair and a finalist for a Publishing Triangle Award. Her work includes fiction, essays, performances, and a feature-length non-fiction film. The End is Not What I Thought It Would Be, premiering in fall 2022. Next, the story in short of the novel Eden. Eden is a clear-eyed, engaging meditation on the aftermath of trauma that shapes the lives of two sisters named Hope and Eden, who were kidnapped and held hostage for 2 days as teenagers. The story picks up 20 years after the event has happened and follows one of the sisters, Hope, as she navigates life in New York as a failing playwright before she decides to finally get in touch with her sister Eden after years of estrangement. This is how the story goes. Next. Next slide, please. We see Hope seems to be dissociating even as she reports on the facts of the kidnapping. She doesn't have a kind of an emotional attachment or whatever, even when she narrates as to what had happened to her while she was kidnapped and kept as captive. Her restricted range of emotions is problematic, but it may have been the author's intention. Eden is not only a novel of post traumatic stress disorder, it's a chronicle of first hand experience. What has happened to the sisters when they were kidnapped by a person, and what are the sufferings undergone by both of them? We see a first hand experience there, and Hope's robotic point of view, and she seems to be unemotional while narrating the experiences that have happened to her, that she and her sister have been going through. It evokes a range of emotions in readers who long for a connection with the hero, but Hope is suffering. She continues to suffer, and even in her career, she is not able to become a successful playwright. We see her as a failing playwright. Next slide. The grown up part of Hope's life as a lovelorn, struggling playwright living in New York City is riveting. The chapters alternate back and forth from childhood trauma to angst driven New York living, hard to navigate, especially when chapters in New York detailing performance art followed closely on the chapters about childhood abuse. We see how childhood abuse is really terrible and how it affects the minds of the children and leaves scars permanently there in the minds of the children. Next slide. Next. As a novel about post traumatic stress, Eden is both fascinating and maddening. A struggling performance artist in New York grapples with the childhood abduction of her sister and its lingering effects on her adult life. She is unable to come out of trauma still, even after she has become an adult. The novel slides between the time of the incident and the present, following Hope, who, as an adult playwright, lives in the shadow of her trauma. She still is unable to come out of it. Next, after the abduction, Eden and Hope drifted apart, their relationship unable to withstand the weight of the tragedy. So, as the story progresses, Hope pursues contact with her sister she has fetishized and obsessed over since the nights their childhoods were cut short. It is dark, it is eloquent and bold. Plain's work is a fierce tale of survival and sisterhood. Next, Andrea Klein's writing we see is sharp and compelling. The plot is steady and engaging throughout. And Hope's road trip, she confronts a series of figures from her past in an effort to track down her sister Eden. The novel has a nuanced exploration of trauma and the ways in which we allow our past to shape our present. It is frank and candid, but the characters themselves are each layered, and their relationship between the two sisters is both intriguing as well as painfully realistic. We all know that truth is bitter, truth is painful, reality is bitter. So the story, the incident which has happened is painfully realistic. And before going to the conclusion, I would like to tell you all of us are familiar with the word trauma because at some point or the other in our lives, we would have undergone trauma. So, trauma is a real experience. We move on to the conclusion slide, please. Trauma is a real experience that produces persistent scars for the individual's personality. It leaves scars which are permanent, which can be there forever, which can never be forgotten or removed for the individual's personality and makes it impossible for him to distinguish between the present from the past. The characters whom we have seen in all these three, say, for example, in the novel Beloved, and the slave who was there, Paul B., and Said's daughter, Denver, all these have undergone severe traumatic experiences. And they still live in that, unable to come out of that. And coming to the next untamed state, we see Mireille, who still is unable to come out of the traumatic state which she has been experiencing out of experiences which were bitter, dark, all these due to her sexual assault, due to her being tortured, and the father refuses to pay the ransom for the daughter to free her, and she starts kind of hating the father for what has happened, for his stubbornness, not being ready to pay the ransom, all that. So we see her unable to come out of that, even after she comes out of it physically. She is still psychologically very badly affected due to what has happened in the past because it was 13 days of long struggle.
சரி அந்த பாட்டை எல்லாருக்கும் வச்சு அனுப்பிலாம் வச்சிருக்கியாமா நம்ம
And the power of traumatic experience restricts the integration into the memory system, as we all know, how it affects the individuals terribly. Any unusual incident, any tragedy, any disaster, any natural disaster, any whatever accident which has happened, anything that happens, no, it restricts the integration into the memory system. It leaves us totally disintegrated. As a result, the traumatic memories will no longer be connected to cognitive consciousness. It stays in the subconscious and it works in the mind forever. Even after months and years together, the person is not able to come out of it. And next slide. How does literature heal trauma? Like psychotherapy, literature can help resolve conflicts, navigate traumatic experiences, integrate disowned aspects of ourselves, and perhaps even achieve inner wholeness or self actualization. Literature has got the capacity to heal us. We all know that literature has got the healing, the power of healing, and perhaps even achieve inner wholeness or self actualization. Books and the experience of reading can promote psychological change, it can heal trauma, and it can offer spiritual fulfillment. So, books can always be the best companions to keep us engaged, to help us come out of the trauma that we actually go through or we have gone through in the past. So that way, literature acts as an agent, a powerful medium to heal trauma. Next slide. I think it's the last one. Can we move on to the last slide? Even after this, the last one. Deepika, how do we treat trauma and how do we heal trauma? And all of us would agree when I say that it is love, compassion, mercy, kindness, understanding, all these together which can heal trauma. And I would like to wind up my presentation. We can have a few questions and answers also. I would like to wind up my presentation with favorite lines of mine taken from Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. So it is love that heals any kind of trauma, and we must be able to love all creatures in the world, irrespective of whether it's human beings or whether it's other creatures. So both man and bird and beast, without any discrimination. Even in Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, we see the person becoming free of all guilt and all suffering the moment he starts loving all the creatures in the sea. So he prayeth best who loveth best. All things, both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. So love, as we all know, is the great healer. It can heal any kind of trauma in individuals, in collective communities, and all that. And now we can move on to the questions. Thank you all. We can move on to the questions. Do we have any questions?
Ma'am, there is a question in the chat box, ma'am.
Okay. Can you just project it on the screen? Is it possible?
Ma'am, shall I read, ma'am?
Yeah, you can. You can.
Yes, ma'am. There is a question like, do you think, ma'am, that the novel Beloved is a double-edged drama, social and feminine? Which one is deeper? Asked by Mukta Sen, ma'am.
Okay. We can interpret it as social and feminine. More of feminine because it is the mother whom we see who has murdered her own child. That too, it is the daughter whom she has murdered. So, on one hand, we can see it as a social drama, a tragedy. On the other hand, we can